When Kanye did his slavery is a choice rant, a lot of people were offended. Why? Ignorance, that's why. Most people were offended by his ignorance of history and race relations in America. So that is the effect of the ignorance of just one person. What if we consider the ignorance of many? In the case of a policy like the global GAG rule, which affects the health of women and children, would we still call that ignorance, or ignorance that has maybe morphed into a lack of empathy? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dami. Today we will be discussing how ignorance can be detrimental in addressing issues in society. In order to do that, we will be analyzing the effects of the global GAG rule in the context of the themes of the New York Times best-selling book, Children of Blood and Bone. In case you're wondering what those two things are, check my previous video to find out. In a nutshell, the global GAG rule basically is a policy that was put in place by the US government to defund any organization that provides abortion services or education overseas. We're not here to talk about abortion. However, what I will be talking about are the other services that are affected by the global GAG rule. That includes access to contraceptives, family planning, and HIV services. On the other hand, the book Children of Blood and Bone, which is right here for you to see, was written by Tomi Adeyemi. The book follows the story of a girl named Zeli who is fighting to bring magic back to her land. It is set in Nigeria, and the overarching themes in the book include things like marginalization of different groups, inequality, and finding ways that we can rise above it. I will read an excerpt from the book, and here it says, "They killed my mother. They took our magic. They tried to bury us. Now we rise." I know. It's beautiful. We're going to get into our discussion right now. I have a guest with me on my channel today. He is a diversity and inclusion expert who is using his voice to challenge stereotypes and biases that marginalize different groups. He does this through his company, UID Management, and he's also the host of a podcast known as Told by Nomads. Let us welcome Rockson.
Yay. Thank you, Dami. Thank you, Dami. It's a pleasure to be on. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. We're happy to have you on too. So the format for our discussion will be constructed around 4 quotes from the book Children of Blood and Bone, as we described. It's right here.
Great book.
I know. So each quote has a theme that will become apparent as we progress in the discussion. Since the author particularly makes a lot of parallels to Black Lives Matter and the police brutality that's currently going on, we're going to use that as a framework for our discussion.
Okay.
Of the global GAG rule, that is.
All right.
Are you ready, Taya?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Awesome. Cool. So the first question that we have, the first quote that we actually have, "I won't let your ignorance silence my pain." My first question to you: the application of knowledge is power. How can gaining knowledge be beneficial to addressing issues like police brutality or HIV stigmatization in women's health?
That's a great question, Demi. And I definitely think the application of knowledge is power. And I think a lot of times we live in a world where we're sort of programmed to accept things as they are. You know, people never really they don't practice critical thinking to understand why things are. And I see this a lot when I go into companies or I speak on stages and I ask people, you know, hey, what are your thoughts on this person that you have a prejudice against? And a lot of times they say, well, that person's a drug dealer, or, well, that person just did that. And I asked them why. It was like, oh, yeah, because I saw it on TV. But then I probe further to say, well, have you actually experienced something with them, or do you know the history? And they don't. And so I think with things like HIV stigmatization and police brutality, if you don't know the information and you operate from a place of what you've been told, it's very dangerous, because then you start to create policies and inform opinions that you start to tell other people without actually having been researched. I mean, we saw recently someone like, you know, Kanye West, for example, say some things out there, but when you start to listen to him, you're like, well, they're not well-researched opinion. You can't just say those things. But sometimes people can take that opinion because it comes from someone like Kanye and say, well, Kanye said it, so it must be true. Right. And so the application of knowledge is power, in the sense that if someone doesn't apply knowledge the right way, someone can just say, whatever that person said, because the person has a platform, is gospel. And then if you actually apply knowledge, you could use your privilege, depending on where you are in society, to actually solve the problem. Right. And that, that's exactly a lot of what it was. Something that I saw as the theme in Children of Blood and Bone, when the characters, whether it was Zaylee, the main character, or people just even Amari turn into the other side, and understanding, okay, this is how my family's violence has really gone against the Magi. Right. This is how I can help to bring magic back.
Right. Great answer. So particularly going back to police brutality again, how would you say, like you mentioned Kanye West, for example, so how does history and culture play into that in terms of when people are knowledgeable about the plight of Black people, the history, having that knowledge, how can it be beneficial using that framework, and also how can it be detrimental?
Well, it can be beneficial because it helps to humanize people of color. Right. Right. A lot of times, whether it's police brutality or people that practice this, if you listen to someone that says it's a myth, you guys, Black Lives Matter is not a thing, all lives matter, they don't actually understand that's a systematic thing, right? This is something that affects systems. There's bias at play, unconscious bias that causes people to be trigger happy, and these things are informed based on just misinformation that they've had. Right. And so those are dangerous pieces of information passing. And so if anyone hasn't had the self-knowledge or self-awareness to practice how you can identify your hidden spots, your blind spots, as well as your biases, it's, like I said, it's very, very dangerous. Now, the interesting part where it becomes beneficial is when white people or people that have not necessarily been affected by it, they start to see this and embed themselves in this environment. They start to understand, oh my goodness, this is how my behavior has led to this. Or maybe they wouldn't take that information from another person of color, but if I said something, people could actually impact change. And that's a very good way to actually do that. Thinking about movies or people that participate in the media, if you start to show things that improve representation, those things help to humanize stories as well. If you want to cover crimes, why would you not call a white person that did something a terrorist and allude to mental health? But if it's a Black person, it's a different characterization. Right. Those type of things, they enter the mind unconsciously, and then they slowly make our way into speech. And so that's the dichotomy there of the positive, negative. And so if you have the knowledge that you as a reporter can report the story the right way, you as someone in a company can create policies that expand the talent pool and your hiring process. You as a movie maker can create movies to tell more stories and finance those opportunities. You as an entrepreneur can fund opportunities in diverse areas to create this opportunity. So it really runs through the gamut from every single part of life.
Yeah, that's actually well said. So now if we're thinking about the global GAG Rule, which is one of the topics that we're talking about for this particular month. So when you're thinking about what's going on in a lot of developing countries right now. So Nigeria, for example, a lot of pregnant women are protesting. Well, they were protesting a few months ago and are still protesting the hike in prices of antenatal and family access to contraceptives and things like that. So what is the implication of society being ignorant? So having knowledge is one thing, but people who are not affected, what's that implication of the ignorance that's just permeating the entire society? How does that affect?
Well, first of all, thank you you're the one that let me know about that. So that's something that I needed to know. But I was ignorant about that. But that's the thing is, the implication of ignorance, especially from what I've read and studied, based on what you sent me, is that the people making these policies aren't the people that have to go through the things, right? Which is very mind-blowing to me, which is why I love the diversity and inclusion space and like to talk about this, is how can you be inclusive and make policies for everyone that you're supposed to rule if you haven't experienced this or you don't have someone that experienced that type of thing in your sphere of influence? And that's the dangerous part. So there's ignorance there, but there's also lack of representation. And it's when I was reading all the things that are happening, I'm struggling to find the words because it is so dangerous. I'm a man who's going to make a rule or a law for women in countries I don't live in without knowing the economic impact. That is so ignorant in every sense of the word, because you're first of all, you're missing the impact on the family, right? You're missing the impact on the financial, the economics, and the exposure to other diseases. You like the malaria, the HIV. That's the danger, and the person that probably made the law probably thought, oh no, it's just I think this is my belief system,
best,
and I just don't want anyone to do that. But it's not as simple as it's your belief system. It's literally a way for life of people. So yeah, I mean, that's just the way ignorance can play. And whenever I talk about diversity and inclusion, is if you want to be inclusive in things, it's about having more voices on the table when you make a decision. It's not about you making a decision about people that you don't really know without researched information, which is why knowledge is power there.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree with that. So the next question that I have for you, still based on the same quote, I won't let your ignorance silence my pain. So there are two parts to this, two questions for this particular quote. So based on your experience as a diversity and inclusion expert, do you think individuals on opposing sides can work together? So in the case of, we have Zaylee and Zane working with Amari. When we're thinking about police brutality, blacks and whites working together, or policemen finding ways to mitigate the situation. And if we're thinking about the issues that women are facing, like you mentioned earlier, men are making decisions and putting policies in place that affect women without even understanding what they're going through. How would you explain bringing two supposed enemies to make them work together?
So when I do this thing, whenever I speak and I talk about this, my signature speech is on effectively connecting across cultures. And I say, you have to educate, don't perpetuate, instead communicate. Yeah. Now, I'll explain. Now, in the education piece, I'm talking about self-education, education of yourself, awareness, and education of the environment. Now, self-awareness has to do with you addressing your biases and your limitations, your blind spots, right? Because if you don't know what you need to work on, there's nothing to work on.
Exactly.
And then the education environment is understanding that the different people around you and understanding how the same set of laws affect those different people, right? And then the don't perpetuate is understanding how certain things, jokes, policies are perpetuated system for certain people. And that comes from the education. And this could be whether it's simple echo chamber stuff online where you only expose to things that confirm your beliefs. How do you make sure that you don't put yourself in that echo chamber? Or maybe you participate in saying, jokes. You and I have had African jokes made to us because people think we're from one country, but it's much more. I mean, those type of simple jokes can trivialize people's identity. And then they instead communicate. This is the piece where people from different parts, people that have different values can actually communicate. And it's about finding common value. In the case of Zaylee and Zayn, is at the end of the day, they realized that the right to live was something that they both agreed on, right? Maybe one was shrouded in privilege and one was not, and they were both taught to hate each other. But when they interacted with each other, they was like, man, well, I guess we're really not that different. Different. We've been taught to hate each other because of the history of your dad causing a raid to take magic away, and that impacted my family, my parents actually being killed. But when they got to hang around each other, even though throughout the book they weren't the best of friends, but they were able to come together because they found a human purpose. They found a common purpose, and that's the thing with black and white, black and cops. It's on some level, everybody believes that you shouldn't kill an innocent person. Right. I think that's something everybody can agree on. Now, the way that happens, whether innocent people keep getting shot, is how can we, black people and cops, say, okay, since we both agree that innocent people shouldn't be killed, what is the issue here? Why do we keep having these violent shoot first things? Why do you have to have 29 rounds on one guy in his apartment?
Why put his hands up and say, I'm holding nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's about having those conversations. And that to me, when it comes down to bias, where if you look at a lot of these videos, a lot of these things are reactions of fear, right? Ignorance and fear, for me, are the biggest reasons why a lot of these things happen. And so I think when people from different backgrounds come together and say, okay, since we both agree on the right to live, how can we both work together to promote this right to live? I fear the cops because, a black person, me, I can just talk from my experience. I'm always dressed up partly I love dressing up, but I'm also always dressed up partly because I'm like, I don't want to be
in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be considered like, I don't even want to have to be questioned. And so I can address that to someone at a cup and say, look, your way of waking up, you don't think about these things on when you wake up every day. Like when I get out of my house, I think about the environment, think about which officer is going to be there, and I think about how I walk there, and understanding and telling them, hey, now, if you had to put yourself there, or your kid have to worry about that every day, how would you feel? And they could be like, okay, well, that's fair. Now, on my end, we are in all these high crime areas, and a lot of times we see many things, so we are at arms because we're used to people coming at us. But then, that's a discussion, right? Those are two different things. And then the person could say, well, can we both agree that hands up is a sign of no threat, right? And can we both agree that if you want to shoot, why are you shooting to kill? If you feel like you must shoot, there are other body parts.
Right.
Since you're training people, you don't have to go to kill. And those are things where someone can still have their own opinion, but you can still come and say, okay, look, yeah, we can agree. Maybe we're a bit extreme with that kind of thing, but let's agree that there's a conversation, there's a protocol, and understanding that. And I think unless we have this discussion, we're just going to keep having these circular things, because at some point, every disagreeing party has to come together, whether it's Democrat or Republican, whether it's cops versus people of color. If none of them will come together, there is never going to be a common ground. It's us versus them. We're both Nigerian. I grew up in two military dictatorships.
I did too.
And all that. Yeah, and even on the tribalistic level, like we have over 250 ethnic groups in Nigeria. We both experience sometimes, there's a distrust because of your tribe, and sometimes, it could be funny or it could be serious. But on other levels, when we come to America, what do we unite over? The fact that we're Nigerian. But when we're in Nigeria, you're Yoruba, you're Igbo, you're that. So why? Why does that happen? And so I just think we need to get to that level where we find common ground, because we don't have a problem finding common ground when we're here, because we only have ourselves. So So that's just my thought on that.
That's a great answer. We have come to the end of our first discussion. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree or do you disagree with anything that we said? And what are your thoughts on ignorance and forming alliances with other people? Let us know in the comments and of your experiences with this. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and let's keep this conversation going. I will see you in the next video for question 2.